In 1980, Ronald Reagan was elected the President of the United States of America. He promised to make America great again with his trickle-down economics. In the early 1980s, some Americans were getting richer and richer, but this came at the expense of a large majority of Americans. In 1982, America saw its largest unemployment since the Great Depression 50 years prior. Many people were unable to meet their basic needs and had to resort to less than desirable options. Between 1982 and 1984, America's cocaine supply increased by 50%. The United States government supported and helped to install a fascist dictatorship in Nicaragua. A leftist group, the Sandinistas, overtook this government, causing its collapse. The United States partnered with local civilians and guerrilla soldiers to attempt to take down this Marxist government. The Reagan Administration was the largest backer of the Contras, the Nicaraguan anti-leftist movement, but Congress was largely against financially supporting the Contras while so many Americans were already struggling at home. In order to continue funding the Nicaraguan coup, the Reagan administration began to illegally sell arms to Iran, and then used the profits to fund the Contras' efforts. United States military personnel were involved directly in illegal arms and drug smuggling in Nicaragua. Planes would be flown down full of guns and flown back full of cocaine. This became public knowledge after a congressional hearing and became a huge scandal. In the minds of many American government and military officials, defeating communism in South America was such an important task that allowing drugs to funnel into the country and people lose their lives was seen as only collateral damage. Yes, communism apparently poses that big of a threat to the structure of the entire Western world. And let's keep in mind that these are the same officials telling people to just say no to the substances they turn to for relief from their very hardship-ridden lives. Cocaine can be made into what is commonly called crack by removing the salt molecularly bound to it. Once cocaine is turned into crack, it can be smoked. Immediately hitting the user's bloodstream, it makes them high in only a few seconds. Dealers would divide the crack into vials, about 1 hit each. They would then sell each hit for $5 to $10, much cheaper than the price of cocaine. Many people who couldn't afford drugs before could now, namely the impoverished and children. As a result, more dealers and users popped up all across America, mostly in cities. Users were desperate to get another hit, and dealers were desperate to make more money. To avoid being robbed by both users and those looking to sell, dealers began to purchase guns in large quantities. In New York alone, the rise of selling crack also raised the murder rate by 63%. The police did nothing about any of it, looking the other way from both dealings and murders. Cops and dealers largely had a deal at this time. In exchange for keeping quiet about the drugs, police would get a cut of the profits. Inner cities in the United States have higher populations of people of color than rural areas. These areas have historically been underprivileged and impoverished. Poverty in itself is a trauma, and those living in poverty are more likely to experience external traumas as well. Trauma permanently alters one's brain structure, forever changing the way their brain processes information. Grieving preventable deaths, unstable living conditions, and constant stress are enough circumstances to leave someone with deep and lasting effects. People with untreated trauma often attempt to treat themselves, resulting in addiction. Anyone can be addicted to anything: alcohol, marijuana, nicotine, shopping, gambling, and so forth. In the 1980s, large portions of Americans began to self-medicate with the newly readily available crack. the media caused a frenzy about crack babies, children born to crack-addicted mothers, sometimes claiming that as many as 60% of school children could be crack babies. In reality, less than 3% of children at the time were exposed to cocaine prenatally. Many Americans, especially white Americans, began to view Black women as bad mothers, willing to put their children in harm's way in search of a hit. In South Carolina, a labor and delivery nurse began to secretly test her Black patients for cocaine usage and turn in positive results to the police. Mothers were being carried out of the hospital immediately after giving birth and being taken to jail. Crack was specifically funneled into Black communities in America by the military, the CIA, and the Reagan Administration, and then used as justification for mass incarceration. In 1986, the United States passed a bill making it so that if someone possessed 5 grams of crack, they would go to jail for 5 to 40 years. That same bill required someone to have 100 times the amount of cocaine to be arrested for the same amount of time. The bill was expanded in 1988 to allow for the arrests of people who had drugs on their person with no intent to distribute. This bill was clearly not anti-drug, but anti-Black. If drugs were the problem, first of all, they wouldn't be funneling drugs into the country, and second of all, they would have equally criminalized crack and cocaine. Cocaine had widely been used for decades at this point, even after it had been made illegal, but it was primarily used by white people, namely the rich and famous. Now that crack had entered the picture, and it was viewed as an inner city and Black drug, it was an easy target to reach the goals of white nationalists. In the beginning of the crack epidemic, the police looked the other way. Once a Queens police officer was killed in a crack-related incident, however, the police presence entirely changed. Officers targeted Black communities, even though the majority of crack users were white. 2/3 of crack users at this time were white, but between 1988 and 1994, in the county of Los Angeles, not one single white person was convicted of federal crack-related crimes. Officers became far more brutal, viewing Black bodies as just that, bodies and not people. Crack would be planted on innocent people, sometimes resulting in decades-long sentences. The war on drugs militarized the police in the way we know them today. In 1994, the Clinton administration passed a bill putting far more officers in cities. The anti-drug federal budget was $12 billion in the mid-90s, making the Reagan-backed $2 billion look measly in comparison. In total, the war on drugs has cost the United States over $1 trillion to date, and increased the incarcerated population from 300,000 in 1980 to over 2 million incarcerated individuals in 2025. Incarceration rates in the US are still an average of 6 times higher for Black people than white people. This is systemic racism, an entire scheme designed to make rich and powerful white people more rich and powerful, while disenfranchising Black communities. Unfortunately, many Americans have sat idly by and watched all of this happen, even supporting it in many cases. Advocating for prison reform, the legalization of drugs, and the demilitarization of the police are often seen as only issues that extreme leftists care about. Conservatism relies on a lack of knowledge. If we're able to understand what happened and how we got here, that's the first step in creating change.